All right, I will say good morning. Good morning. Let's begin. Or let's continue, I should say. So we are, I'm going to finish up Perek Beis today in Oros HaTeshuva, which is page 17, second chapter. So remember again, just a quick recap. Rav Kook has outlined in an incredible, tremendous way these two different forms of tshuva. Tshuva pitomis, this is instantaneous or like sudden tshuva, whereas Rav Kook explained the lightning bolt goes off inside of my neshama. Suddenly, again, I feel inspired to be able to fix all of the things that are broken, to address all the things that are in a state of disrepair, and everything becomes so amazingly and overwhelmingly and beautifully clear. And Rav Kook says, again, his lashon, which is so important, is where does this tshuva come from? Where does this emanate from? So remember, again, this is not really something that I've done, right, or something that I've accomplished, but rather, again, he calls it a result of a hofa'a pnimis, that this is the result of some type of inner dynamic that ultimately, again, is occurring inside of me, some type of inner kedusha. Really what he's referring to is the fact that I have a neshama, and alakai neshama shenasat to be tehorihi, the neshama is strong, the neshama is damned, and every once in a while, the neshama has the ability to break through and to kind of steer the course of events. Then he said there's another type of tshuva, which is tshuva hadragis, or this incremental step tshuva, where again, I take once, I understand what I have to do in order to change my life. I put one foot in front of the other. I take small incremental steps, ultimately in order to go ahead and change my life and change myself. Rav Kook says, there's no big lightning bolt that goes on over here, but rather, again, there's a progression. The progression begins with changing my midos, and from changing my midos, ultimately, I move on to changing my actions. Now, at the end of the Perek page, Rav Kook says, Sunu, which is the higher level of tshuva. Now, again, not lav dafka necessarily that it matters per se, which is the higher one, because we really, as we'll see as we go on, we need and we experience both. But it's almost as if Rav Kook's trying to delve into the inner mechanics of tshuva, because it's very important. As Rav Kook mentioned in the introduction, a lot of what's happening over here is a quest to understand the dynamic of tshuva, meaning as opposed to other svarim on tshuva, let's say the Rambam's Hilchos Tshuva. What is the Rambam trying to teach us in Hilchos Tshuva? He's trying to teach us how to be Bali Tshuva, right? And as such, so Hilchos Tshuva is really about the mechanics, right? The mechanistic details, the behaviors of tshuva. In Oros HaTeshuva, as Rav Kook mentioned in the introduction, this is also about just exploring the concept of tshuva, plumbing the depths of tshuva, understanding philosophically, spiritually, and of course, behaviorally and mechanistically, what is tshuva and how do we access it? So look what he writes here at the end. HaTeshuva, so this is page 17, the bottom paragraph. HaTeshuva Halyona, so this is beautiful, the highest level of tshuva, get ready for this. Ba mehavraka shel hatov haklali, shel hatov ha'eloki hashora ba'olamos kulam archei olamim. See, interestingly enough, Rav Kook really says the highest level of tshuva is tshuva pitomis. Isn't that incredible? I never saw this coming, right? As I always thought that the highest level of tshuva is tshuva hadragis, right? Incremental step tshuva. A, because I'm doing the work. B, because generally most change, which is slow, steady, incremental, usually has the greatest chance of lasting, of enduring. Yet Rav Kook so beautifully says the highest level of tshuva is actually tshuva pitomis, this sudden, instantaneous tshuva. If you look at footnote number 9 for just a moment, Rav Kook he says over here like this, he says, La'achar shehizbir es tshuva hadragis, Chozer Rabbeinu umevar es makor shel tshuva pitomis. So after Rav Kook explains the dynamic of incremental step tshuva, he goes back and talks about tshuva pitomis. Haba mehavraka shel hatov haklali. The lashon is so incredible. Where does tshuva pitomis come from? So Rav Kook says it comes. Havraka is like a lightning bolt, like a flash of light, like boker, right? It comes from an illuminating blast of light of the general good in this universe. Shel hatova eloki, the goodness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, or divine goodness, hashora ba'olamos kulam, that exists in all worlds, Archei ha'olamim. So in the footnote he says, very beautiful, he says, Benigud l'tshuva ha'dragis, shelo berika havrika b'kirbo, l'eshapech me'omer hara latov, eli talich hadragasi anovea merikshas ha'adam. So remember again, tshuva hadragis doesn't come from a lightning bolt. Right? It doesn't come from some flash of spiritual illumination. Rather, where does it come from? It comes from me, right? I make a conscious decision, I want to change my life. I make a conscious decision, I want to adjust the way that I do things. Okay, and Tshuva HaDragis ultimately does that. He says, Harisha Tshuva Pitomis Mikora Mahal Yonius Shemichutz La'adam HaMe'oreres Es Ha'adam. So if Cook says, Tshuva Pitomis comes from a source beyond me. From a source beyond me, which is really an incredible inquiry. So whereas Tshuva HaDragis comes from within me, Tshuva Pitomis, instantaneous Tshuva, comes from a source outside of me. There's something pulling me higher. Of course, that something is HaKadosh Baruch Hu. By the way, very reminiscent, right? In the Balatanyas, Ani Ledodi, Vidodi Li. Right? What does the Balatanya say? Ani Ledodi is what I do. Is what I do. And in fact, right, the Balatanya writes, this is Elul. Elul is all about what I do. And if I put in the requisite effort, then Vidodi Li is HaKadosh Baruch Hu pulling me towards him. So if I put in the effort to push myself towards HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Hashem reciprocates in kind and pulls me towards him. A really incredible idea, which is very similar to what Rav Kook is saying over here, just without the sequence. Whereas the Balatanya understands it to be a sequence. First, do your tshuva hadragis, essentially, right? Do your part, put in your activity, go ahead and bring yourself closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Then the HaKadosh Baruch Hu reciprocates in pulling me towards him. Rav Kook doesn't have necessarily the reciprocity model. I mean, everyone agrees with the reciprocity model, but he's not espousing that over here. What he's discussing over here is just tshuva pitomis is this highest level because what it represents is the Ribono Shel Olam literally pulling me towards him. And what is there in this world that is holier than HaKadosh Baruch Hu pulling me towards him? There's nothing holier in this world. There's nothing more beautiful in this world, nothing more powerful in this world than HaKadosh Baruch Hu pulling me towards him. It's just such a beautiful and incredible way to look at it. So he goes on, let's finish up the parak. He says, Nishmas Kol, page 18, Nishmas Kol Ha'atzilis, Mitztayeres Lifanenu Bahoda Akdushasa, Kimo Shahalev Yachol Lispog. So I'll say that, of course, Rav Kook's wording is very poetic as well. So Nishmas Kol, right, the soul of everything, ultimately, again, is in full form in front of us, in its glory, in its beauty, to the best that the heart is able to absorb. In other words, what Rav Kook is saying is as follows. There are certain dynamics in this world that we can't understand, certain realities in this world that we can't fully comprehend, but yet they're nevertheless incredibly true. The notion that HaKadosh Baruch Hu reaches out from the great beyond, I don't know if that's a Jewish term, but whatever, from the great beyond, right, and actively pulls us towards him. It's just the most magnificent concept one could possibly imagine. Because what does it represent? It represents how much HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves me. Because you know how sometimes in life, like someone reaches out to you, someone says Shalom Aleichem, and you're like, oh, like that person, they're so busy with like a million different things, right? There's so much going on in life. And they took the time to say like a Shalom Aleichem to me. It feels so special. Rav Kook is saying the fact that the Ribono Shel Olam, the King of Kings, the Melech Malchei HaMochid, kind of takes time out of running a universe to take my neshama and to pull it towards him. It's the most magnificent and beautiful thing that one could ever imagine. He goes on, he says, V'alo be'emes hakolu tov v'yashar kolkach v'ayosher v'hatov shebanu halo hu ba mehas amasenu el hakol. So this is very beautiful. Rav Kook says that at the end of the day, V'alo be'emes, in truth, hakolu tov v'yashar kolkach, everything is good. Right? Remember again, we have everything is good because HaKadosh Baruch Hu runs the world, and therefore everything is good. Whether we see the good, understand the good, appreciate the good, everything is good. And ultimately, again, that yosher, that justice, and that good that is inside of us really comes as a result, ultimately, again, from our connection to the truth, to the world around us. Again, he's waxing a little poetic over here, which we'll get into more in the next parak as well. Efshar lios karua min hakol, perur mishuna, mefurad ka'avak dak shekelo nechshav. And how could I allow myself to be detached from the enormity of the universal good that exists in this world? If I'm detached from the universal good, his lashon over here is parad mashuna. I'm like a solitary crumb. Like a solitary crumb. Meaning what? So just to kind of bring this back and root this a little bit more in just this concrete idea, Rav Kook is saying that Tshuva Pitomis is this moment, this great holy moment where my soul is part of the great continuity of this world, right? Where my soul is part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. My soul is part, ultimately, again, of just this universal cosmic truth and goodness. And when I have that moment, everything is in perfect equilibrium. And from this moment of clarity, right? That because Tshuva Pitomis offers you this moment of tremendous clarity where I know exactly what I want to do, how I'm supposed to do it. Ba'a Tshuva me'ahava b'chaye haprat u'b'chaye haklal. So if Cook Paz, Tshuva me'ahava. Now, by the way, I just want to point out, this is the second time in 2 chapters that we're making reference to this Tshuva me'ahava. Now, Rav Kook doesn't use the word as much. Here he's using ultimately, again, Tshuva me'ahava. In Parak Aleph, if you remember again, in the last level of Tshuva Sichlis, Rav Kook explained that Tshuva Sichlis has the ability to turn our Averos into mitzvos, which is what the Gemara termed ultimately as Tshuva me'ahava. And here, interestingly enough, Rav Kook is calling Tshuva Pitomis Tshuva me'ahava, which again, it's fascinating because Tshuva me'ahava is one of those concepts. The Gemara puts it out there, a tshuva motivated out of love. Only one problem, which is the Gemara doesn't explain what it is. Like, what does that mean? Tshuva, ava of what? Ava of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, ava of tshuva, ava of my best version of self. Like, what is it? That's why it leaves a lot of room for interpretation. So here, fascinatingly enough, Rav Kook is saying that from Tshuva Pitomis comes Tshuva me'ahava, which is so beautiful. Tshuva me'ahava is the result of experiencing this instantaneous spiritual awakening, which is really just an incredible and beautiful idea. So therefore, I will say, fascinatingly enough, we'll have to stop over here for today, but fascinatingly enough, Rav Kook, I think, contrary to what we would have thought, understand that the highest level of tshuva is tshuva pitomis. Now again, why would we normally think that tshuva hadragis is a higher level? On a simple level, because at the end of the day, tshuva hadragis is something that I do. So generally we ascribe greater importance to processes that we quarterback versus processes in which are performed or done to us. But yet Rav Kook says, what tshuva pitomis represents is the Ribbon Shalom reaching out and pulling me towards him. When that happens, there is nothing greater in this world. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu reaches out and pulls me towards him, and as a result, I experiencing this lightning bolt of clarity, of awakening, of holiness, of inspiration, in tshuva gedola mizo. And when that happens, Rav Kook says, that paves the way ultimately again for tshuva mi'ala. I will stop over here for today. So much more to talk about. By the way, I just also want to point out, I'm not really, just because we have a relatively short, not relatively, a very short amount of time every single morning, I'm not really getting to do the footnotes, but I would tell you, as I'm giving you the PDFs also, the footnotes are really beautiful and contain just like a lot of supplemental sources, some of which explain to you where Rav Kook's kind of philosophy comes from, and also other supporting sources. So I would urge you, like, you have a few minutes on your own, take a look at the sources. They're really profound, really beautiful. Both say Mazel Tov on Parak Beis. Emir Hashem, tomorrow morning we begin Parak Gimel. Shkoyach. I don't know, yeah.